We're heading deep into Washington's Olympic National Park, a place where mist hangs heavy in ancient forests and where the line between the living and the lost grows thin. From the storm-battered beaches of Rialto and Ruby to the moss-draped silence of the Hoh Rain Forest, this landscape feels alive, watching and listening. This is Haunted Parks. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine-chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Just like I said, because I messed up my own recording schedule, I am doing an extra episode this month because I got off track and I added one on. So, this is this month's Haunted Parks. We are going to be discussing Olympic National Park in Washington. So, my name is Elise, and thank you so much for tuning in to listen today. I hope you guys enjoy this bonus episode. Welcome to another installment of Haunted Parks. Today, we are venturing to Olympic National Park, where visitors report strange lights flickering between the trees, phantom footsteps on empty trails, and ghostly figures wandering in the fog. Some stories trace back to the park's early homesteaders, others to tragedy swallowed by wilderness itself. So grab your rain gear, pack a headlamp, and maybe something to ward off spirits, because today we're stepping into the shadows of haunted Olympic National Park. And one thing that I want to start doing, I don't even know why I haven't been doing it, is to do a land acknowledgement before every episode about the places we're talking about. So before we begin today, I want to acknowledge the lands that make up what is now Olympic National Park, because these are the ancestral homelands of many indigenous peoples who have stewarded this region since time immemorial. So this includes the Quileute, Hoh, Quinault, Skokomish, Maka, Jamestown Skoklallam, Lower Elwha Klallam, Port Gamble Skoklallam, and the Tulalip tribes. And obviously, I tried to pronounce them all correctly. I used Google, but some of those are difficult for a white person to say who doesn't know any of these languages. So thank you for your patience. And yeah, I am thinking it's a good idea to do land acknowledgements before every episode. So that was for today's. Like I said, I don't know how I haven't done it before, but it's something that I think I'm going to start doing. So let's jump into some negative reviews about Olympic National Park. Our first review says lodging and customer service is terrible. Cabins were unkept, dirty with bugs. Which is interesting, like, they must have stayed somewhere in the national park, but to me, that's not a reflection of the actual national park. Someone else, all their all their review said was, "Not interesting." Someone else's review says, "There is just too many trees, dot, 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 and it could really use a Walmart." Another negative review said, "Birds attack you, waves come dangerously close, and locals might make you disappear." And then our last negative review says, "I saw Sasquatch. I was scared. Not cool, man." So, as most of you know, Olympic National Park is located in Washington on the Olympic Peninsula. The park has four regions: the Pacific coastline, alpine areas, the West Side temperate rainforest, and the forest of the drier East Side. Within the park, there are three distinct ecosystems, including subalpine forest and wildflower meadow, temperate forest, and the rugged Pacific coast. This is a park that I have been to, and I've done hiking there, and I've camped outside of it, and it's really a very lovely and beautiful park. It was established June 29th, 1938 as a national park, so it's 87 years old, and it gets over 3 million visitors a year. It is a very popular national park. It ranks 25th among national parks in the United States for visitors, and it's just under a million acres. It's actually 922,650 acres. Now, in the beginning, President Theodore Roosevelt originally designated the park as Mount Olympus National Monument on March 2nd, 1909. The monument was redesignated as a national park by Congress and FDR on June 29th, 1938. And in 1976, Olympic National Park was designated by the UNESCO as an international biosphere reserve. And then in 1981, it was dedicated as a World Heritage Site. So it's very rich in history and it's really a very distinguished national park. I know most national parks are, but this one is very famous. It's very beautiful and it has a lot of rich cultural history behind it. Olympic National Park contains the largest wilderness area in Washington, and it used to be called the Olympic Wilderness, but in 2017 it was renamed as the Daniel J. Evans Wilderness in honor of the former Washington state governor and U.S. Senator Daniel J. Evans. So during his tenure in the Senate, he actually co sponsored the 1988 bill that created the state's wilderness areas. So that's why they did that. But I don't know. I feel like they could have kept it as just Olympic wilderness, but I don't know. That's just me. So, Olympic is very famous for its coastline, and the coastline portion of the park is extremely rugged. And it's like it's a beach, obviously, it's coast, but it's rugged, it's rugged coastline. And then there's adjacent forest, next door. The coast is 60 miles or 97 kilometers long, but only a few miles wide, with native communities at the mouths of the two rivers. The Hoh River has the Hoh people, and the town of La Push at the mouth of the Quileute live the Quileute tribes. The western side of the park is mantled by temperate rainforest, including the Hoh Rain Forest and the Quinault Rainforest, which receive annual precipitation of over 12 feet or 370 centimeters. And this actually makes this area the wettest area in the continental United States. So it is very rainy. This park provides habitat for many species, including the Roosevelt elk that are native only to the Pacific Northwest coast. And as a result, scientists have declared it a biological reserve and studied its unique species to better understand how plants and animals evolve. The park is home to sizable populations of black bears and black-tailed deer. The park also has a noteworthy cougar population, numbering about 150 cougars. Obviously, if there are cougars, there were mountain goats, and mountain goats were accidentally introduced to the park in the 1920s, and they've actually caused a lot of damage to the native plants and flora. So they actually are being managed. The National Park Service has activated management plans to control the goats. So this is a perfect example of being very, very careful as to what species you introduce where because these mountain goats are invasive and they're actually doing more harm than good in this specific area. In terms of other animals, there are tons of animals that call this park home. Some of them include, all the little small rodents like chipmunks, squirrels, skunks, stuff like that. There are coyotes, muskrats, river otters, beavers, red foxes, martens, bobcats, black bears, Canadian lynxes, snowshoe hares, and off of the coast, they have whales, dolphins, sea lions, seals, and sea otters. And when I visited, I really, really wanted to see a sea otter, but that just was not in the cards for me. And I'm just kind of sad that I didn't see one, but a lot of people do when they go to Olympic National Park. Now, because this park is so varied, there are a lot of different recreation opportunities within this park. There are several roads in the park, but none penetrate far into the interior. The park features a network of hiking trails, although the size and remoteness mean that it will usually take more than a weekend to get to the high country in the interior. The sites of the rainforest with plants that run, they go crazy. It's so thick and dense. Um, it's a beautiful, beautiful park. So really the more established areas like the Hurricane Ridge area and the coastline, like you can get to those pretty easily because of the roads. But if you're going to actually do any more remote hiking, it is so dense and difficult to get up there. Something unique about Olympic National Park is the opportunity for backpacking along the beach. The length of the coastline in the park is sufficient for multi day trips, with the entire day spent walking along the beach. Although idyllic compared to toiling up a mountainside, one must be aware of the tide because tide changes and water's dangerous. And at the narrowest parts of the beaches, the high tide washes up to the cliffs behind, which blocks passage. Several promontories must be struggled over using a combination of muddy, steep trails and fixed ropes. I would love to go on a backpacking trip along this coastline. It would be just, I think, so like magical, honestly. So, the real reason why you're listening today is to hear about why Olympic National Park is haunted. And there are a few reasons, but we're going to start on the topic of ghosts. So, the most common ghost sighting near Lake Crescent is the Lady of the Lake. Now, no one knows for sure, but she's thought to be the ghost of Hallie Latham Illingworth, who disappeared in December 1937. So, let's talk about Hallie. She worked at a tavern as a barmaid, and at the age of 35, she had just ended her second marriage. So she was unlucky at love, or maybe she was just marrying assholes. I don't know. But being on a second marriage in the 30s wasn't super common. Hallie gave it another try, and she married a man named Montgomery, and he went by Monty, Montgomery J. Illingsworth, in June that same year in 1936. He was a beer truck driver, and she had actually met him while she was working at the tavern that she worked at. Monty, they got married, and he didn't even bother hiding his beatings when he would beat her. Hallie would often go to work with bruises and black eyes, and she actually confided with a coworker that Monty had choked her and broken one of her teeth. So, after just 5 short, probably long months of marriage, the police were actually called to break up a fight between Hallie and Monty in the early morning hours outside of the tavern. Hallie disappeared on the morning of December 22nd, 1937. So obviously that's suspicious. Maybe back then it wasn't as suspicious, but if that would have happened today, all of us would have said it was the husband, right? So Monty told everyone that Hallie had run off with a sailor from Alaska, but the story seemed fishy and a lot of people didn't buy it. So there was a lot of suspicion happening, but Monty was granted a divorce in 1938 in her absence. He then moved to California with the roommate of Hallie's sister, and in 1940, a body surfaced on Lake Crescent. This body that washed up was wrapped in blankets and tied with a rope, but that's honestly not the spooky part. The body's skin had turned into a rubbery substance and it was perfectly preserved. It was not bloated like most bodies. Um, because it was held in the water and it's cold down there, and there was really little to no decay. She was perfectly preserved other than missing facial features, fingers, and toes. And the body did show evidence of being beaten and strangled. The doctors called it an ivory soap corpse because of the skin's condition, like just very white and like the complexion was flawless. So, Lake Crescent's depth is not known with exact certainty, but likely has parts that are deeper than 1,000 feet. And when the body had been submerged in the deep waters of the lake, the cold prevented decomp, and the salts and the calcium in the water slowly converted the tissue into a material like soap. And It's just that's so weird to me, and just like soap, a body converted in this manner floats, right? So, after it was done undergoing those chemical processes, it was no longer weighted down and it floated to the circuit surface. This body had been weighted down, and the ropes connecting to the weights eventually decayed, and that's how the body floated to the surface. So, even though there could be no facial recognition or fingerprints, police made a positive identification of the body as Hallie Illingworth because of the physical match, hair color, and dental records. Also, police had a clue as to who did this to Hallie, which the clue was the rope itself. The rope that was used was peculiar to Sears and Roebuck. Through receipts, it was tracked to the tavern owner who had bought it to tie up boats. The tavern owner remembered that a beer salesman borrowed 100 feet of rope to pull his truck out of the mud, and he had never returned that rope. And you know who the beer salesman was? Of course, we all know it was Monty. He was then extradited from California and stood trial for Hallie's murder. He claimed that the body wasn't Hallie and that he had seen her alive, but her dentist testified to her identification through dental records. Monty was obviously, I'm glad, found guilty, and he served only 9 years in prison before being paroled. That is a crazy short amount of time to serve for murder, but whatever. And so this is the Lady of the Lake, and she's often seen, near and around Lake Crescent. And to explore Lake Crescent and potentially see her, you should hike around the lake. And along the trail, you'll get beautiful lakeside views and can take breaks at different waterfalls. So it's a very beautiful lake, but it also has some really dark stories behind it. Also, I don't know how true this is, but apparently there is an underground stream that runs between Lake Crescent and Lake Sutherland, and it's never been really explored. And some people online say that it could be hiding the bodies of many missing people. So I didn't really know how that works, but I did think it was an interesting thing to read about this underwater, underground stream that no one's really done any digging into. The second ghost we're going to be talking about today is someone who haunts a specific trail slash area. So this is actually on the Hoh River Trail, and it's home to another eerie legend and ghost. The trail is said to be haunted by the spirit of a woman who drowned in the river many years ago. The ghost reportedly feels most strongly near 5 Mile Island, where travelers have reported hearing disembodied voices or laughter. And honestly, I think just hearing that to me would freak me out more than seeing something. So, one account describes a spectral figure dressed in damp clothing on the riverbank. The figure's face was obscured by tangled hair, and she vanished when approached to, be drawn. Moreover, native legend adds even more to the trail's mystery because local tribes believe in forest guardians, spirits to protect sacred land from intruders. So, this has been one that has been seen often, but it's not there's no, like, known story. It's pretty much just a legend because of what's been spotted, but it's not like a story like Hallie's story, like, we actually know for sure that something happened here. So, like, kind of like a legend, or it could be possibly some of the local tribes' forest guardians. No one really knows. And honestly, the local indigenous tribes' stories of forest guardians might be the reason for the third ghost that we're going to talk about today. And this one has been seen around Soul Duke Falls Trail. And this is a trail where there are stunning vistas and a beautiful waterfall. But there's a strange legend that has been constant for decades. So, residents who have known the tale of an otherworldly figure lurking near waterfalls at dusk, and this thing has been seen many times. So it's been seen usually as a dark silhouette or even an otherworldly glow. Visitors who have traveled along the trail say they hear whispering voices, carried on the wind, as if the former inhabitants were summoning them. So, this is pretty scary. And actually, there was a group of trekkers who met a ghostly hunter dressed in traditional tribal attire standing still at the edge of the trail. Now, the closer the group got, the figure vanished into the mist. Nothing was left behind but the faint scent of wood smoke. Native legends speak of spirits guarding the sacred ground, and most people believe that these ghostly figures are the remnants of those who lived here before. Protectors or victims, their spirits are still lingering in the shadows of the falls. This I'm can't even imagine the eerie feeling that you would feel if you are on this Solduke Falls trail and you see something like that. This is said to be the most haunted trail in Olympic National Park. The last ghost we're going to talk about today, it this one actually has a story behind it, and this actually happened at Lake Quinault, and which is another very picturesque location in Olympic National Park. And it holds a ghost story. So, the Lake Quinault Lodge, built in 1926, is supposedly haunted by a woman named Beverly. Now, she was a former employee who tragically died in a fire that destroyed the original building. So, both staff and visitors have witnessed her otherworldly presence wandering around the halls, especially in the Beverly Suite, which is a room named after her. A lot of people say they feel a chill, lights flashing randomly, and objects alone shifting, as if Beverly is still working at her former workplace. One story from a guest, they were unloading and they were suddenly confronted by a woman who presented herself as Beverly. The ghost told her that she used to work at the lodge and then poof, vanished. The staff confirmed that no worker by the name Beverly was present at the time, leading most to believe that her ghost remained behind to protect the lodge. Legends say that Beverly's friendly ghost protects the lodge, but her visits occasionally include malicious playfulness, like glasses and silverware falling off of tables. Okay, so of course, I had to go to Reddit to see about anything that any Redditors would say about Olympic and how it was haunted. And I found a thread and I'm going to read it to you. So the original post says, I'm doing seasonal work out in Olympic National Park this summer and live in employee housing on the same property as my job. Throughout the summer, I've heard things like a giggle coming from an empty room and a sliding door closing on its own. One night, about a month ago, something wild happened. The building I live in is backed up against an impenetrable coastal rainforest, and some friends and I were sitting in one of the apartment units chatting when we all noticed screaming coming from the woods. Initially, we thought it was a cougar, but it kept going and was decidedly human sounding. Sometimes it seemed more like sobbing, and in other moments it was frantic yelling. It went on for about 5 intense minutes and then suddenly stopped. Now, the truly chilling part. About 30 seconds after the yelling stopped, what sounded like a disembodied woman's voice coming through a radio started muttering right next to where we were sitting. We couldn't make out what she was saying, and it only lasted a few seconds. It was in the room with us, but we couldn't see anything. One of my friends opened the door to make sure there was nobody outside, and we were completely alone. It should also be noted that everyone who lives in the building were all in the same room, so all of the other units were empty. All of us who have lived here we're all puzzled over any logical explanation for what could have happened, and we just can't seem to find one. Okay, and then there was a reply. This reply says, I've done seasonal work in forests, as have some of my friends. It's like a given rule that you never have to go out in the woods after sunset because it gets weird out there. Park rangers know way more about parks than they let on. Someone knew the area and asked about stick Indians. The person replied, So, in some NA tribes throughout the Pacific Northwest, there is this folkloric creature that lives in really isolated areas of the woods. They lure travelers with the sounds of disembodied human voices in the distance, usually crying, laughter, or a woman calling out in distress. They are supposed to be tremendously malicious and rape, kill, or rob travelers. Stick Indians was the only non-native name given to them because using the actual name was rumored to manifest or invite them kind of like skinwalkers and then it's bleeped out and I don't even know what it says. This person then goes on to say that there's not a lot written about these things, but you would probably be better off asking a Salish or Lumi native. And then they linked an article, and I'm going to read that, what it says about these things. In the traditions of many Salish and other northwestern Indian tribes, stick Indians are malevolent and extremely dangerous forest spirits. Details about stick Indians vary from tribe to tribe, but they are described as large, hairy, Bigfoot like creatures by the Salish and as forest dwarves by the Cayuse and Yakima. In some traditions, stick Indians have the power to paralyze, hypnotize, or cause insanity in hapless humans, while in others, they merely lead people astray by making eerie sounds of whistling or laughter in the woods at night. In some stories, stick Indians may eat people who fall prey to them, kidnap them, or molest women. They also take aggressive revenge against people who injure or disrespect them, no matter how unintentionally. So that is really scary. The actual Salish name of these is considered to be provocative and not in like an explicit way, but to provoke their attacks in some tribes. So people are still calling them stick Indians, and that's an English euphemism. Not an expert on this, I'm just reading what I found online. So, out here in Olympic National Park, in the tangle of moss and mist, stories linger like the ghosts themselves. Whether it's a lost hiker's echo on a lonely trail or the whispers of the Quinault and the Quileute legends that carry on the wind, Olympic National Park reminds us that wilderness holds more than just beauty, it holds memory. Every towering tree and shadowed trail has seen something we can't explain. Maybe the park's haunted past is just nature's way of keeping us humble, reminding us that we're only visitors in the land far older, far stranger than we can imagine. So the next time you wander through foggy woods, listen closely to the creak of the cedars, the hush of the rain, and the stories the forest keeps to itself. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep your light close. As always, recreate responsibly and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. You can also join us on Patreon for early and ad free content. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.